Alrighty, well, looks like we've hit a critical mass, so let's go ahead and get started. I am the host. My name is Eric McClellan. I've been the trainer here at Repairify for 2 years now. Been loving my time here. Today's topic is going to be how to identify vehicles' required calibrations before you start the repair. Oftentimes we're seeing shops missing these calibrations, and that can impact things like your KPIs and can also impact revenue. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these things. We also have a demonstration in our Centers of Excellence where we have a live vehicle with Mr. Anthony Padilla. Let me introduce Mr. Padilla and the rest of the crew. Anthony has been in auto repair industry for 25 years as a Ford dealer technician. He started out with asTech in 2019 as a remote scanning technician, then moved to remote calibration, and now works in our R&D department. He tests and teaches multiple calibration systems, including our TruePoint, the Autel, Launch Bosch, and other systems. Included in our panel today is Mr. Kris Bjerke. Feel free to give a wave if you want to. There he did. 25 years of automotive experience. Mr. Bjerke is asTech's Director of Implementation and Calibrations. He's also an expert in all technical aspects of ADAS calibrations. He leads our calibration and implementation team that ensures customers a properly trained, equipped to perform calibrations in their shops. Someday I'll learn how to speak properly. Also with us is Sam Poradish. He is Repairify's Director of Automotive Intelligence. Sam is behind several of Repairify's cutting-edge repair technologies and is the designer and architect behind our AI repair planning tool called asTech Insights. It's been implemented in the analytics database and is the foundation of our rules engine. So that's a pretty important tool that works behind the scenes and oftentimes isn't seen very much. And finally, we have Derek Mohart, who got his start at the as an automotive repair technician and is now Repairify's process improvement manager. He works closely with our training and development team to serve the needs of our customers and internal technicians. And pretty neat little feather in his cap in 2023, Derek was recognized as P10's Best Young Tech of the Year. So those are our panelists. They will be answering some questions. If you have questions, please use the chat feature. We'll get to them as soon as we can. We have several segments here, and we'll stop for Q&A after each segment. We have 4 of them. But if you have other general questions, feel free to put those in the chat as well, and we'll get to them as needed. Now, if you don't like the chat and you want to be unmuted, we can do that at the very end. But just for the sake of time, just use the chat for the time being. So with that said, let's kick everything off. I'm going to kick this over to Mr. Bjerke here. There's some pieces here about calibrations and what is the industry kind of telling us about calibrations? How are they being missed? And what does this really mean for KPIs and bottom line?
Yeah, so, starting back in 2020, I wanted to say 2022, but back late 2020, it was identified by CCC that we were missing as an industry 80% of the calibrations that are needed on a vehicle. And that's ADAS calibrations, not your mechanical calibrations. Fast forward a few years, we're getting better. We're still not there yet, but according to CCC, back in late 2023, we were still missing 75% of ADAS calibrations when we're doing these repairs. Now, think of the source, right? Very reliable source. Are we not billing it? Are we not putting it on the estimate correctly? Things like that. That could be part of that noise in that number. Because I really hate to think that we're missing 75% of our calibrations out there right now. You think about, like Eric had talked about, thinking our KPIs. What happens when an ADAS system stops working or isn't functioning properly? Sometimes nothing, right? The customer doesn't know. There's no DTC because the system doesn't know what it doesn't know. But what happens when it's a little bit out of adjustment and those systems start seeing things they're not supposed to? Well, they will kick a DTC and they'll throw something up on the dash saying, hey, go visit your dealer, right? What does that mean for us? Return to shop, right? And that's going to hit us in our CSI, affecting our, reliability with our customers, with our insurance partners that are out there. We just, and not having a safely repaired car. I always like to say, and some my compadre loves to say it too, we put these cars to a ready to crash state. And even think about when we've been putting quarter panels on, roof panels on, different things that we do during the structural repair process of a vehicle. I mean, you're counting spot welds. Certain vehicles you're putting 10% more on, you're moving them to the side, right? We all know that. We've been pounded that for a long time now. But that's the same with our ADAS systems. It's reading our procedures, making sure we're doing the right thing for that to get that car back to a ready to crash state so that when it does crash again, because let's face it, most of our customers are repeat customers. When it crashes again, it reacts the way it needs to, whether it's a quarter panel and the collision energy, or if it's that ADAS system that's, telling them there's a car in their blind spot or doing the automatic emergency braking. Those sorts of things need to be the way they were designed. And then, top it all off with revenue. We're missing revenue, and let's go the other way. Think about, John Eagle. It's one of those sore subjects in our industry, but the negative effect on our revenue if we're not doing this and something happens, right? Those are all things that you need to think about while you're thinking about ADAS calibrations. And I know it all comes down to, hey, we don't have time. There's not enough people. Our estimators are overloaded. What tools can I use? How can I do this? It's something you have to put in your process.
So I'm going to ask a question here, Kris, that when a customer returns a vehicle, right? Do we have any like data or numbers about when they get returned? How many of those are ADAS returns?
Yeah, so the numbers really hit me wrong. So I did some more digging, and the reason they hit me wrong because they lined up so well. We all know that not every customer returns when they have something that needs to be returned. But again, according to CCC, 75% of what was returned, so not out of the 100%, only 75% of what was returned to shop did have an ADAS problem. So not just a squeaky door seal or my lock doesn't work. 75% said that of what actually returned to the shop said that it was an ADAS related problem. And again, you probably see why I did some serious digging after
Yeah.
that, because those numbers they lined up way too well for me, and it didn't pass my sniff test. But
Too
um,
round of a number.
exactly.
So
So
what is that 75% that come back that have an ADAS issue and they're missing several ADAS components to begin with. So that's a double whammy as far as revenue is concerned.
yeah. One you get to touch the vehicle again, right? But then you're not getting that on the front end. You're not getting that part of the sale. You may be able to supplement this now, but go back to reputation, right? And the revenue that drives. You get known to start missing that stuff or not thinking about some of those safety things. And I mean, we all see it now every day. Um, you think about how things come to the consumers. You're our customer, right? But your customer is the one that really needs to make those decisions. I applaud Safelite for getting out there and talking about ADAS, and maybe it's just their windshield cameras, right? But it's giving that consumer a little bit of awareness to know that, hey, this stuff's out there and it's on your cars, and it needs to be repaired properly when it's done.
I've always believed that a well-informed customer is some of your best customers at the end of the day.
I agree. I agree. The more they know, and that also what sets you apart is the repair facility, is that you're paying attention to this. You're making sure you're doing it the right way, whichever way you choose, whether you're subletting it, whether you're doing it in-house, or what tools you're using, right? It gives that customer that nice warm fuzzy feeling that
Mhm.
you're making sure that their kids can make it to soccer or they can get to church on Sunday safely.
So I'll throw it out for questions if folks have anything just about that specific topic, but we'll kind of transition to the next piece. And why, okay, Kris, we're missing a couple ADAS things here. couple things come back. I always hated comebacks to my shop because they were getting in the way of my productivity, frankly.
Right.
Um, but I mean, if let's say they don't come back, let's just say you missed the calibration. Why does that matter?
Well, and I'm going to refer back to the old John Eagle again, right? I feel that everybody knows that story, and it wasn't even the customer that had it repaired, right? Um, there's no legislation laws out there saying that these systems have to be checked, have to be working properly before you sell a vehicle. So, the downstream customer, the second owner of that vehicle, maybe it's even the vehicle that your kid gets next. If it wasn't repaired correctly, how do we know that those systems are working properly? And you hear about it all the time. You think about these systems, and I used to say it back when I was in the shop every day. What's wrong with turning your head over your shoulder and looking for that car in your blind spot? Well, kids aren't taught to drive that way anymore, right? They're taught in their parents' cars that have all these options on it with the blind spot, with the lane watch, with the front radar, slowing them down as they're using the cruise control, right? It has become so dependent that they get into a car, they know that that's how they have to drive, and they depend on that system. And maybe it's a motorcyclist in that left lane that they go to change into, or maybe they set that cruise and they're texting on their phone. And again, root cause wasn't the system not working, it was them not paying attention while they're driving. But it goes to that our society depends on technology and everything that they do. And once they get a taste of it and once they know how it works, that's how they function, right? They don't go back to the old ways unless there's that bright light on the dash saying, hey, this isn't working anymore. So the liability, and again, think of that John Eagle. They sold the vehicle, but they traced it back to that shop, and that's who got to take the blame for it because they're the ones that did what they did. So it's going to follow you as a shop owner. And back when this started coming out, I would lose a little sleep way back then of our cars getting repaired correctly. Are my shops and my managers making sure that all this is being done? What safeguards can we put into place to make sure that these are done and we don't have any liability issues coming down the road?
Well, I want to stay on that liability thing just for a second, Chris,
Yeah.
because I have seen a lot of folks will outsource their calibration to the guy in the van, right? The
Well,
quote guy in the van.
yeah.
Um, do we really know how much liability that guy in the van has?
Well, I mean, that guy's got some liability too, but it's your subcontractor, right? Think of building a house or anything that you do within your shop. Tires, alignments, your interior guys. They do carry some of that liability, but they're your subcontractor. So if you get named in a lawsuit, doesn't mean you did anything wrong, right? But if your subcontractor did something wrong, you're still on the hook for that. And knowing your subcontractors and how they do things, and that's a huge portion of it. I scroll Facebook quite a bit, right? And I'm part of these ADAS groups, and I cringe every time I see something being done outside, right? And some of the areas that they're doing calibrations in, because did they do it? Sure they did. Did they do it right? Probably not, right? Just by the pictures. So making sure you have a good partner, and along with that whole liability thing comes documentation. Can you go to court and say that that was done correctly? How? Do we have any pictures of it? Pictures or receipts? That's what we always taught, is that pictures or receipts. Without a picture, it didn't happen. So knowing some of that stuff, and I'm not trying to scare anybody here. It's just you don't know what you don't know until you start learning about it. And that liability section of things is so huge in this, and making sure it's done correctly.
Well, I know you're not going to want to scare people, but a little bit. I want to put a little bit of fear in folks just because I don't know how many of those quote guy in the van. I know there are some very reputable ones who do very good work, of course. But I've seen a few of them that are just either starting out or may not be fully aware of their own liability. So, it's, if again, you're the GC of it, you're the main point of contact. If that guy in the van only owns the van and that's the only asset that person has in their entire life, they're not going to try and get money out of that guy. They're going to go for you instead. They're going to go for the deeper pocket.
Yep. And
So I'm gonna invite Sam here to also chime in on why it matters they're missing calibrations because of revenue, your own bottom line. So Sam, if you've got an opportunity, unmute yourself and join us in conversation.
Yeah, so I think, obviously the liability is a huge factor, and I think it's kind of what originally drew attention to this subject. But the calibration element of collision repair has matured a little bit over the last several years, as people have become increasingly aware of it. And I think there's a new layer to the game now too, which is not just the binary, did you do it or didn't you, which is really the determining factor in liability. But now it's come down to, when do you realize you need to do it and how are you doing it? It's kind of that logistical layer where you have opportunities to perform these procedures more efficiently and as a result make them more lucrative for you. And what we're seeing is it's all about finding out that you need to do them as early in the game as possible and understanding what comes along with that, which is not just that you need to do it, but also what's going to be required in doing it. Do you have the equipment available? Do you have people trained up on how to use it and understanding how to do that specific procedure? Because even the solutions, they kind of automate target placement and things like that. It's not exactly the same every time. People need to understand how to do it. And like Kris was talking about, vehicles are getting better at figuring out sometime down the line when the calibration's not been performed properly and turning that dash light on. But at that point, you've got a bad customer experience, right? You've got a supplement you weren't expecting, and you've got somebody who wants their car back very, very quickly, and a problem that you need to solve quickly. And that's not a formula for making a good amount of revenue on the calibration. That's probably when you're, calling the guy in the truck or sending something to the dealership. So the more that it's possible to understand early on about what's going to go into that process, the more opportunity you have to do it on time with no supplements and get the most amount of margin out of it possible.
We did have a question that came in through chat that looked relatively timely, which was, I would think when you're talking about subcontractors, mobiles, etc., wouldn't the law look at the same as a shop employee? If the owner of a shop and one of the employees repairs something improperly, I'm still the one responsible party, as I'm the one entrusted the employee to perform the service. I would think if I hired a mobile guy, I might include him in my damages, but ultimately I'm still on the hook.
yeah, Ben, you're right on. I mean, obviously different state laws, different things, but overall, that's really what I was talking to, is that, you are responsible for what your subcontractors do, just like an employee.
Excellent. Thanks for the question that came in. Appreciate it. All right. Now that we've got everybody sufficiently frightened,
Eric.
thank you. Thank you very much. That's what I'm here for. I'm gonna ask our Toyota folks to just kind of start getting warmed up because we're kind of getting down there. I'm gonna pass it off to Sam for this next topic, which is adding calibrations and identification to the pre-repair planning process. What can you tell us about adding those things before you even touch the car?
So, like I was saying, right, the earlier you can detect them, the better opportunity you have to do them the way that you want to do them, which means the full suite of options is available to you if you want to do it in-house or outsource it to someone else. Do it remotely with an OEM scan tool, do it locally with an OEM compatible scan tool. All of those options are available. And what we're making a significant investment in now, and kind of our first real data product, ADAS Think, it's really all about extending that, is trying to leverage technology to make it easier for people to do this. Like we touched a little bit earlier on the fact that vehicles aren't fully self-aware in terms of what's wrong with them, especially when it comes to collision, right? Most DTCs are kind of designed around common mechanical failure paradigms and things like that. Every collision's unique. You can't really expect them to self-diagnose everything accurately, and that's particularly true when it comes to ADAS calibrations, because the vast majority of them, the criteria for necessitating a calibration really revolves largely around like the removal and reinstallation of body panels or the replacement of body panels, which will frequently lead to a code in a dash light, miles down the road after you've given it back. But you can know up front, just from the guidelines that the manufacturers have published, which of those is going to induce the need for a calibration. And that's really what ADAS Think does, right? It looks at what you've currently put into a repair plan, traditional collision repair operations, and then derives from it what calibrations are going to be necessary. And then beyond that, it's also going to help you understand what's going to be required to do that calibration, right? Is it going to be a static or a dynamic? Are you going to need targets? Are you going to have an OEM tool involved? All of those things, so that you can plan as much as possible up front, get the right cost estimation up front, and understand all the logistics. Like, if you're going to outsource it, who are you going to outsource it to? When are you going to do that? Does it fit into the grander scheme of when you're going to deliver the vehicle, et cetera?
Yeah, Sam, you started talking about ADAS Think a little bit. Do we have a media for that? I think we talked about doing a kind of a brief demonstration.
I do not.
Okay.
I don't know if somebody else has one prepped, but I don't have ADAS Think ready to demo.
Okay. So I know you wanted to mention asTech Insights as well as one of our additional products.
Yeah, so asTech Insights is kind of a natural extension of this concept. Like, ADAS Think really is revolved around looking at the estimate and deriving what needs to be done from the estimate. What the Insights product is all about is kind of supplementing that functionality with the other data that we have available from the car. So, we get the estimates through one of our integrations or a document upload that tells us something about the intended repairs to the vehicle. But through the scan, we also get a lot of valuable information about the vehicle in the form of DTCs, but we also get more accurate build information by scanning all of the modules, and by kind of adding to ADAS Think that additional data in the form of insights powered by our artificial intelligence, which has been trained up using all of the different feedback that our technicians have provided in OEM scans over the years. We're able to get a more complete look at kind of the vehicle state, and therefore give a more complete answer as to the required repairs up front.
Yeah, and it looks like Mr. Bjerke here has shared his screen where we've got a ADAS Think report pulled up. So, Kris, can you kind of just give us a brief rundown of what we're seeing?
Give you a high level. So it's going to identify it goes off of your estimate, right? And throughout here, you'll be able to look at some of these hyperlinks. So looking up here, you can see that, hey, there's one ADAS required operation, and there's 3 safety operations based on the collision that this vehicle was in. And it's all based off of your estimate that was dumped in here. And I could go into the back end and show you the estimate, but it starts with the important parts to me. That's what I deal with every day is ADAS, right? So it says, hey, because of the accident it was in, vehicle was involved in collision, the eyesight or the dual calibration static and dynamic for the windshield camera needs to be done. It shows you how to perform it, links you right with all data or the OE procedure, and then it also gives you that requirement. So it helps our estimators, right, in a way of not having to dig through a whole bunch of stuff to try to show an insurance partner why they have to do it. The proof is right here. It links right with it. And so then you can see some occupant sensors, some vehicle electronics with pre and post scans, and then some electronic inspections. But again, it gives you all those links. You can copy those links. You can give them to your insurance partner and go from there. Now you can hit new report. You can drag and drop right into here. That will scrub your estimate within 3 to 5 seconds. And then, it'll kick up reports like this where just grabbing a random one that was run through, you can see it thinking about it here for a second. And it'll say these required operations. But, if you hover over this one, it shows you the line right in that estimate, because you R&I that front bumper assembly on line 15, you have to do a front radar. And because of taking the bed off, the tailgate off, thinking there's the tailgate handle, you have to do the Pro Trailer backup assist alignment. And the windshield camera, hey, line 32, you did an R&I on a windshield. Good glass company if you're doing an R&I and they didn't break it, right? But because of that, you're going to have to do that windshield camera. So it gives you those operations and why. Again, linking you to the actual procedure, but it shows you right in the estimate where that was.
Question came in that seemed relevant here, Kris, is do we have to update ADAS to let it know, or ADAS Think, I assume they're asking, to let it know we have an asTech system?
So I'm thinking you're talking about the green check marks that you'd seen in there. That is a feature with our hybrid calibration shops that we work with, that tells you whether you have it or not. Now, it's going to tell you what you're going to need if you're not one of our hybrid shops, but there's always potential. Talk with your salesperson. We can really dig into that at that point in time.
And if you don't know who your salesperson is, feel free to put a note down here. You can send me a note and I'll make sure to follow up with you. They followed up with, we were under the impression it only worked with GM and Nissan.
Yeah, it works with everything. ADAS Think works with every single manufacturer. Again, it bounces off of a database, sees what that car is. You saw that Ford. It asked a couple of questions. Sometimes not all the as-built data is in there, so how that vehicle was built at the factory. So you might have to answer a couple of questions, but it bounces off that database, tells us what's in there, and then it takes a second look at, all right, the procedures for taking off this bumper, pulling out this windshield, it was hitting the quarter panel, whatever that may be. That's where it bounces back into procedures. It's all procedure-driven information. Not an opinion, but all manufacturers.
There's even more follow-up. Here we go. We know ADAS works with everything. The asTech system we were told we could only use with GM and Nissan.
So, Ed, that's probably a question that we can take offline to get further depth of just it's only working with GM and Nissan. I'm not sure if you're talking about you might not have tooling for anything else, or as far as the asTech device goes, or the all-in-one, both of them work with everything, not just GM and Nissan. The calibration wise, it depends on the calibration and what equipment you have. Now, if you get a Toyota in and you don't have any of the static calibration equipment, unfortunately, we're unable to help you until you get that equipment, right? So there's many ways that answer can go, but over and above all that, we can help with any vehicle that is out there.
And I did put my email in the chat there, Ed. If you just want to email me, and I'll make sure to connect you with the right person. Cool. All right. Yeah. Sometimes we can solve the world's problems in these meetings. Sometimes we can't. So, it's the way it goes sometimes. There's a couple kind of timely questions that came in that I thought were pretty good, and I'll just kind of read one out loud. It says, I run a full ADAS calibration dedicated facility in Southern Mass. We utilize ADAS Think, but very important piece is to make sure our customers, buy shops mostly, put the proper vehicle options on the estimate, so that I'm going to add the next part of that, which is so that ADAS Think has the proper information, correct?
So that sounds like the question. That is driven off of the VIN, right? So whatever CCC, Mitchell, Autotex puts in there for the options, that doesn't matter. Take you back to that little flashback of a screen. I wonder if I still have it up, and I'll kick it out there real quick. Only very few times is it going to ask you what's on the vehicle. It's going to, again, know that as-built information, and it's going to ping off of that as far as the options, all based off the VIN. Now, Ford is one of those that not all their information's in there. So if you see these potential calibrations, right? ADAS Think identified a potential calibration on optional sensors because they're optional. Is this a vehicle equipped for a front radar? So now you're going to see, right now it says yes, but if I click no, now there's only 2 required ADAS operations. It probably had it, but maybe it didn't have Pro Trailer Backup Assist. Again, it changes that because now you don't have Pro Trailer Backup Assist. Now you're just doing that front radar and that front camera. So yes, it's good to know your options, right? Not taking anything away from that, but ADAS Sync is not driven off of the options that are on your estimate. It is purely driven by the VIN of that vehicle and the as-built data on the back end of it.
Follow-up comment, same person said, I just had a 2024 Audi, came in today from the shop, said there was no ACC calibration, but I know after R&I in the front bumper, it has to get done. And I saw the estimate from CCC did not have the option selected on the estimate, and it wasn't self-populated. Is it maybe because it's too new? Question mark.
What year was it?
2024 Audi.
That shouldn't have been an issue. I'd love to do a deep dive on that one to see if there is an issue on the back end. We are working on this every day as new things come out. I will say with Audi, there's a couple of things that until you get into the tool, it won't give you a couple of the options. And when I say that, maybe it's a static versus a dynamic. But again, it bounces off of the manufacturer's requirements, so that's going to come back in and see.
Let's see. Somebody said that this is they see it often with Audi and Porsche as well. So okay, Audi and Porsche. And then somebody also commented that they found the application documentation on Sun Collision. But yeah, feel free to email it to me if you want. I'll take a look at it and see what we can do.
Yep.
In the interest of kind of wrangling us back here a little bit.
It's your job.
Hey, you gotta wrangle everybody up, close those doors. So, let's throw this over to our man in the shop, Anthony Padilla. So I'm gonna make the request now. If you guys can turn on your camera, show Mr. Padilla. There he is. Let's make sure to pin him. So he is pinned, so everybody can see Mr. Padilla in the shop, and he's gonna talk to us about walking around and identifying ADAS.
All right, good afternoon. We have a 2018 Toyota Camry here. Has multiple ADAS systems. Let's start at the windshield, identifying what we have up here. This triangular cutout here, that's all our forward-facing camera.
We got a nice glare from the light that's above it. There we go.
There it is.
Yeah, there we go.
You got it.
And this is a typical setup for the camera, windshield camera. We do have other makes that have multiple cameras, such as Subaru, could have 2 or 3 cameras, but that's what you'll typically see. And of course, anytime this windshield's removed or replaced, it needs a calibration. This one is actually a static, so it will require targets and setup. We can move now to the front bumper and see what we have up here. So we do have a millimeter wave radar. Most things now have smooth emblems, which are a telltale sign of a radar behind there. But we also have some cars still out there that are actually behind the front fascia that you can't actually see. So I've identified some of those systems. You could go to the steering wheel to see if you have adaptive cruise. One other system we have up here are the parking aid sensors. They can be color matched to the vehicle. And usually they're circular in shape. This particular car, there is a calibration for these. Anytime the bumpers are removed, the angles have to be registered to the module. One other thing we may have, this one doesn't have it, but about this area here, we'd have a camera for the surround view system. So that would need calibration once that camera is removed. So let's take another look at a big picture. So if this bumper comes off, will we need a radar calibration, 360 calibration, and parking aid sensor calibrations. This one does have intuitive, so they do need to be registered, the angles for those sensors. And so if we move around to the side of the vehicle.
So Anthony, you're saying that just R&Ing that front bumper, there's 3 calibrations alone.
Absolutely.
At least.
At least.
That
everything's attached to this
iterated.
bumper. So when it comes off, it is needed.
All right.
And we'll come around to the side of the vehicle. This vehicle has blind spot. One way you can tell on your vehicle is to look at the mirror, the actual glass itself. It has the blind spot indicator. These will light up when you turn the vehicle on both sides. Let's see if we can show that. So that lights up. However, if the system is not malfunctioning or you have an issue with that mirror, it won't light up. But if you have that, you do have blind spot. Those sensors are not visible, but they are on the quarter panel back here. Those on this particular car, it does require calibration whenever there's impact or repair to that quarter panel. Bumpers replaced. Anything that may affect the radar shooting through that bumper, it needs to be checked. This one also has reverse camera. On this particular model, it does have a calibration. You'll find some that don't require, but this one does require static calibration. And then again, we see our parking aid sensors here, and those do require a angle verification and registration when the bumper's removed or they're replaced. There's also elevation checks for those. We always recommend looking at OESI to see what the calibrations involve and how to actually complete them properly.
And Anthony also said something about the steering wheel, and just because it's low light in the inside of that vehicle, I figured I'd show that picture. So you're looking at your steering wheel, and again, we're just looking at some quick, easily identifiable areas, or how do we identify those systems? You know, you've got this picture with a radar coming out of the front of the vehicle. That's for your adaptive cruise. You've got and some people call it the Wi-Fi signal coming out of there. I've always found that funny. You've got this little guy with a lane deviation. Really, that's your lane keep assist. So looking at different spots in the vehicle, I did grab another one. This is an older vehicle where the blind spot monitor was down towards the left knee. It was not on the steering wheel. So a couple different places as well, as far as what Anthony was talking about as the interior of the vehicle.
That's all we have on this one. Again, this one doesn't have 360, but you'll have mirrors in the side mirrors, or the cameras in the side mirrors. Excuse me. That's another way to tell you have 360.
Derek, did you have you have something prepared for this? I seem to recall. You're muted, by the way.
Yep, I figured that out. Yeah, I do have something prepared for it. Just gonna kind of show a little bit of walking through service information for this. We're gonna be using ADAS, just because I know ADAS is so popular and widely used compared to actually, going into OEM service information. And ADAS is pretty, pretty consistent with different manufacturers. So it's always a good tool to use. Let me share my screen.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay.
Remove the pin for Mr. Anthony. All right. You are now sharing.
Okay. So through ADAS, you can see I have the Toyota Camry pulled up here. The same kind of equipment that, the vehicle that Anthony just showed us has. One of the tools that I really like to use, especially when identifying calibrations for different manufacturers, and this is pretty common across all manufacturers. I'm not going to say that 100% of all the makes have this tool on their ADAS. And some of the newer vehicles, it just takes time to update service, because ADAS pulls information from OEM service information and pulls it in ADAS. So sometimes if the manufacturer doesn't have the information updated, it takes a while for all data. But usually if it's a 2024, at this time of, at this phase, it'll actually have it updated. But this quick little tool is ADAS Quick Reference. So going into ADAS Quick Reference, we can see all the different sensors. We can sort it by location, component, or system. So this starts at the front of the vehicle and it moves around the vehicle in this type of sorting system. But we'll go with, let's just go with the millimeter wave radar sensor. That's the one that Anthony showed you. That's behind the Toyota symbol on the front bumper. So we can see here the millimeter wave radar sensor. So these are the different types of systems that are going to be affected by or have some type of a relationship with this different camera or sensor. So we have the adaptive cruise control. Obviously, that's the system where detecting vehicles down the road, and it's changing your cruise control speed based off the speed that the vehicle in front of you is going. We have the automatic emergency braking, the forward collision warning, lane departure warning, and lane keeping assist. So all of these different systems and modules have relationships with each other. So then in the next column, we can kind of see here required. So this is telling us based off what is done to this specific camera or sensor, not the parts around it, but this specific sensor. If it's going to be R&R, which is repair and replace, or remove and replace, then it's going to require a calibration. We can also see front TV camera, which is the surround view. This is the one in the windshield, and it has a relationship with the surround view. But this is whether it's even R&I. So if the windshield comes out, this is mounted to the windshield comes out, whether you replace the sensor or not, once that new windshield goes in, then it's going to need calibration. Next column also gives you whether static or dynamic. Really, the only two options we have. So static obviously is when the vehicle requires targets in a stationary position. That's when the calibration takes place, and then dynamic is going to be on a drive, whether it's a test drive, doing a calibration with asTech, using our equipment. We'll initialize the module and send you on a test drive to perform that dynamic calibration. And the next column just shows you all the different tooling and equipment that is required to perform this calibration. So Toyota has very specific prerequisites. So clear level floor, OEM special tools. They have, once you go into the repair procedure that shows you how to calibrate that specific camera or sensor, it'll give you the part numbers for these different special tools. Obviously, we have the scan tool. We'll need that to initialize the calibration. Any shop built or supplied tools, they will also outline that in the repair procedure as well, give you that information. And then the target numbers are included as well. And the targets are also based off what kind of calibration equipment you're using if you're performing these calibrations yourselves. Obviously, if you have a mobile guy, they should know what equipment and what tools are going to be used. So another key piece is going to be recognizing the locations of parts that are being replaced. A good example is the front bumper repair. So we have the millimeter wave radar that's in the front bumper. Now, off the top of my head, I know as soon as that front bumper comes off, it's going to require front radar calibration. But if you haven't run into thousands of these instances like some of us have, it's not going to be common knowledge. So using all data, we're going to look at the repair procedure for a front bumper. Toyota does a pretty good job. At the top of their repair procedures, we have front bumper installation. They show this tip on removal or installation. So I'm just showing you the installation procedure here. But just at the top, they have this hint. When the front bumper is damaged or deformed due to an accident or contact with other objects, or the bumper installation area on the body is repaired, it is necessary to perform millimeter wave radar sensor adjustment. I like this example because this is we get a ton of repairs on the front bumper because that's the majority of where most damage occurs during collisions. So it's always a good example to use. Not every manufacturer is going to call it out like this. Sometimes it's just figuring out where to look for manufacturer. Some just don't provide the information. But this is always a key thing, is to go into the repair procedures and actually look at the procedure to see if they're calling out based off what is being repaired or replaced, if a calibration is going to be required. So like I said, not every manufacturer is going to give this helpful information, but this is just why research is so important with all the technology that's arriving into vehicles nowadays and how some of these sensors can be well hidden. It's always a good step to be looking into the repair procedures to verify, when calibrations are going to be needed. But let's also think about this logically. For the majority of our sensors or cameras on the vehicle, when they get removed, nowadays they're going to need some type of calibration, whether that's static, dynamic. A lot of dynamics, your domestics or Euros. Basically, you're just going to need to go for a drive, and it'll auto calibrate. But thinking about this, if we have damage on a roof of a vehicle, most of the time we know that the windshield is going to remove, so we can replace the skin or perform PDR, whatever the issue may be. Once that windshield gets removed, that windshield camera is going to need calibration. So at that point, you can go into service information, find out what type of calibration it is. That's linking back to that all data chart that I showed you, and it'll tell you what equipment is going to be needed. And for another, I like always using this example as well, is so if you're thinking about this vehicle driving down the road, when we talk about identifying calibration, we may not get a DTC, may not get a warning on the dashboard. Now, when this vehicle is driving down the road, it's looking for obstacles down the road. So we have the millimeter wave radar. If it's looking at something that's 200-300 feet down the road, say a semi or something, it may be able to detect that just because it's such a big object. Even if the camera could be off 0.01 degrees, it would still detect that, semi truck all the way in front of you. But, we start getting into a little more extreme angles differences. We start getting into 0.1 degrees, 0.2, keep going on and on. It may detect something, but it may not be telling the camera or the system that that's at the exact length away from the radar that it actually is. So this is just, this kind of leads into just knowing, if what parts are going to be coming off, whether it's going to need calibration or not, because we want to make sure that no matter what, this vehicle is seeing these objects at the distance that it needs to see these objects at. We don't want it to be kind of giving us false information just because the angle is off. And it won't tell us that the angle is off. All it needs to know is that what it's seeing is what it's seeing, whether it's at the distance it's at or not. It just needs to know that it's seeing something, that it's working, and it's currently, not throwing any codes, and it's actually plugged in, and all the circuits are working. That's all this camera really knows. And it's just giving us information based off the values that are input into the camera or sensor.
All righty, good. I am unmuted, so good. I don't need to unmute myself. Well, we got about 10 minutes left. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to open the floor to any Q&A folks have out there. I've already received an email from somebody, so thank you for the email. Saw that come through. I will make sure that gets routed to the correct folks and get you the answer as fast as possible. So thank you for that. But otherwise, if you want to be unmuted, we can. You can ask your question that way. Otherwise, you're free to leave. You don't need to listen to us anymore if you don't want to. But if you have questions, we'll stick around for a few minutes. Put them into the chat if you'd like. Otherwise, that is the end of today's presentation. We wish you a good rest of your day. And hope it all goes well. But we'll stick around in the chat just to see if anything pops through. Any final words, gentlemen?
Use the tools you can that are available to you. Like I said, like we've talked about, ADAS Think is probably the easiest button there is. We used to do a class. It was 2.5 hours just to identify this stuff. And going along with research. I mentioned it before, our estimators run out of time. We don't have time to do it. And a tool like ADAS Think is one of those easy buttons. It was a game changer for our calibration side of things when we got it. And I love it. Nothing's perfect, right? You're going to find some errors here or there. But 99.9% of the time, it's giving you what you need. And again, that easy button to give it to the insurance adjusters or partners.
Question did come in. Is there any consideration for periodic or annual calibrations? I've heard a lot about sensor wear and calibration loss as components degrade. That's actually a good question.
It's a great question. I don't know that there's an industry standard answer on that yet. From what we've seen, it would be more, you say sensor degradation. The big one that we see a lot of is the Nissan radar stain, and that literally comes from a portion of the inside of the radar drips down into the face of that radar and leaves a stain on the radar. The components that we're seeing now are very rarely, unless in a big collision, having any internal faults or degradation. I would more see, say you live in Alaska or you got a lot of dirt roads or rough roads, mounting system errors, right? Like you get a lot of jarring going on, kind of like a collision. That might be something you would want to consider, but as an industry, there has been nothing that has come out to say, periodic or annual/biannual type calibrations. And you think of legislation that may be coming. Maybe it's part of the vehicle safety inspections for the states that have that in the future. But again, there's no standard for periodic or annual calibrations on those.
Good question. I didn't even consider that as a possibility, but yeah, there've been a couple instances where I've seen, dust or some junk get in between, the windshield and the camera because that seal isn't perfect, or I've seen a couple of those instances, but yeah, nothing periodic. But other questions that folks have, we'll stick around for a couple minutes, but again, you're free to go. You don't have to stick around if you don't want to. We've got 5 minutes or so left if you have questions. Otherwise, yeah, that is our presentation for the day. You have my email if anybody wants to get in contact with me or have a question. I can always route those future comments and questions to the right folks. Question came in: can a BSM radar be damaged that will only show up intermittently?
Can there be? Yeah, absolutely.
Toyota.
Yeah, Toyota. I have seen that. I can't give you specific instances. I did have one where it was, a hard jar on the passenger side of the vehicle. The driver's side did lose some continuity and had an internal fault, and it was intermittent.
Yeah, person says it calibrates fine, and then the car will leave and eventually will not work. And thanks for the comment. Follow up. All right, another question came in. Do we hear any talk about revamping requirements for ongoing maintenance of ADAS features? As a consumer, if my forward radar fails, there's no requirement for me to get it fixed. But if I trade that car in and it's not obvious, things aren't working, what does that mean for the next owner? Just curious. You touched on it with the possibility of safety inspections. Is there any serious discussion about that in the industry?
I'm going to pop back to Mike for a second, Eric.
Go ahead.
So lots of problem solving in that. Yes, we have intermittent internal faults, but if the things I check first off when it leaves and it works, and now all of a sudden it's intermittently not working, it could be the angle of the installation. That's one thing that happens commonly. Aftermarket bumper, a repair in that area, or our fancy little Kappa or stickers, reflective stickers that may be in there. They'll work in the static environment, but it will not when it goes out into the road. So look for stickers, look for thickness, repairs, and then just installation angle. And when I say installation angle, our body techs love things flat and shiny, right? Don't necessarily have to match side by side, but that often a little bit of an angle will cause a problem. Did check and made the repair happen again. I think you did all those things first. Cool. That's where I'd start. Then some deeper digging after that. So back to Ben. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of serious discussion on it. Reading the industry documents I do and hearing things from the manufacturers, it's, I foresee it coming in the upper East Coast where a lot of our stuff comes from first. When our vehicle laws and right to repair stuff comes from the state of Massachusetts, and I think that's where you're from. A lot of that stuff sparks from up there. I've got a lot of good legislatures that spark some of that vehicle repair stuff, and they really listen to their auto body associations. But yeah, I would love to see that more and more, just because you don't know what you don't know, and you don't know how it was repaired before. It gets back into that John Eagle thing, right? Who could have known that roof was glued, and the effects down the road, right? So as an industry, we just have to get better.
All right. Well, considering the time and not seeing any other comments come in, I think this is a great place to end. Thank you, everybody. Again, you have my email if you have comments or questions. We'll get to them as soon as possible. But that is it for today. Thanks for attending and have a great rest of your day. We'll end the meeting right about now.
Meow.
Right now.